Guys, welcome back. This is Block with Blocka Blocka TV coming to you again with another video. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, guys. It greatly appreciated. It's free 99 and you'll get thousands of dollars worth of game information that you can take and use for whatever purposes it suits you for. Getting into this video, I want to discuss this ammo shortage and why the ammo shortage of 2020 is the least of your concerns. I've been wanting to do this video and not wanting to do this video because I wanted to do the video because it's important to get the information out there, but not wanting to do the video because I'm one of those people that when I instruct people, I expect people to listen. I figure if you made it to a certain age in life that you've come across enough trials and tribulations that you have learned to be able to discern the times and your surroundings, and you're able to make a reasonable amount of decisions that actually lend well to your well-being. So when people don't listen to sound judgment, that kind of throws me off, and I hate saying things and giving advice and just people just not really listening. So that was why I didn't want to do this video, but I'm going to do this video because this information is needed, because what we're facing is literally it's something that the world has never faced before. And there's been depressions. There's been a Great Depression. Some people will argue that '08 was the second Great Depression or even bigger depression. But this, what we're entering into, there is no going back to the way that things were. And what I frequently see is people attempting to get their lives back to what they call normal. Well, there is a new normal, and the new normal is a time of uncertainty. The new norm is uncertainty. There's not going to be the things, the monotone life that just kick back and relax. Those days are out of the window, guys. And I am not the type of person that is a fearmonger. I'm a realist, and being a realist, I understand the things that I face, and I like to make sure that I get at least some bit of control of my environment. So that being said, guys, I want to get into this, and I don't want you guys to believe when you watch this video and listen to what I'm saying. I don't want you to believe that there's going to be you're going back to normal. You have to come to grasp that there is no way to go back. And I'll explain to you guys why there is no way to go back to what you thought was normal. It's impossible in this world for man to make things go back to the way that it was. The only thing that would fix the way that things are coming down the pipeline is for the whole world to be destroyed and then rebuilt up again afterwards. But what we face, the paradigm that we live in, that the way we've been living for these last few hundreds or a couple of millennia, this world is done for, guys. The people who control this world, they're at the end of their power, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it because they don't have any options. They've exhausted all possibilities of fixing what it is that they've broken, because they don't have an answer to the things that face this world. They don't have cures for things that face this world. So their idea is to just destroy it all or let it all burn and let the people burn with it, as opposed to allowing the people who have the means and the ability and the gifts to rebuild the world, to build it up in a better way. Those people cannot live in a world that's not ruled by chaos. So let's get into this, guys, because this has everything to do with the ammo shortage we're experiencing, with the attacks on freedoms and the riots and all of that. This is all byproducts of that. But getting into this, The first part of what I want to talk about is the one reason why we're not going back to a norm is because with this pandemic, which literally hit out of nowhere, and it didn't hit just the United States. It didn't hit Africa. It didn't just hit South America. It didn't just hit Australia. It hit the whole world at the same time. When there's a disruption to the world economy and it's hits on all fronts, there's no almost no recovery from that because previously what one country was, another country becomes that. So you have one superpower, then when that one fades, there's another superpower. Well, we don't have that anymore. As the United States fade from being a superpower, there's no superpower that's out there right now that we know of that can take the place of the United States as a superpower in this present paradigm. With everybody going through economic collapse and collapse of industries, that's there, guys. There's nothing out there. I don't care what you believe. The reality is that there is nothing that we know of that is humanly possible that's out there. You have millions of people without jobs. And because millions of people without jobs, you have things that have appeared that most people don't even take into consideration. The riots have been nonstop this year. And these riots are not new to the earth. I mean, recently you had the, what were they called? Like the Arab Spring and all of those things. And then you had Italy and all these other European countries that the last few years have been rioting. Yeah, Egypt. And there's plenty of places where the riots have been constant, guys, nonstop already. And we're actually, as a country, entering into those things where we're coming to a point where so far, since the riots have started, the riots have not stopped. The protests and a lot of this is being, or uprisings, they're not really riots. But a lot of it is uprisings, but a lot of it is riots as well. But these things are not going to stop, guys. We're at a point where there are too many factors that lend to why these things are happening. Another thing is China. China, regardless of where you believe that the coronavirus came from and who started it and where it started, I mean, we do know that China, at the end of last year, end of 2019, China was going through this whole COVID thing, and the world was not informed. And I don't think it was just China who knew of this. The rest of the world, the powers that be knew. They just could not. What I can just think of what reasons why they would not or could not bring themselves to tell the people how bad it was, because I would assume that they would assume that people would not follow government orders. They would riot in the streets. You know, the things that are happening now where people would buck up against the system. But imagine waking up one day and then knowing that tomorrow or today you didn't even get a notice. You know what I mean? Like tomorrow we're going to do something. No, it's like you wake up and then it's there. So imagine having knowledge of that months in advance. If November, China knows that they have this virus and they're already starting to quarantine people and things like that. And those Chinese residents have been all over the world for months at this point. You know what I mean? Where people believe that that's how a lot of it spread. You get to a point where if the government, I assume that they feel like if they told people that these things were happening, that people would start to already panic and panic buy, pull their money out of banks, start ignoring government orders, stop paying bills, and all the things that are happening now. Imagine having foreknowledge that this time was coming and you had 3, 4, 5 months to get yourself prepared for this. And to be like, I'm not, well, if this is how it's going to be, I may as well stop participating in the system so assuming that's their reason for trying to keep control of the people by just not letting you know until you're actually in the thick of it, where you can't do anything. If I tell you today, hey, school is over and your kids can't go back to school, then that's it. Kids, school is over. There's nothing you can do to force the government to open the school back up. Another thing, guys, is the Postal Service. And when you see all of these things that I'm going to list, guys, you can see that there is so many, there's like circles, right? Each circle is an environment. And some circles overlap other circles, meaning they cross into these other environments. So if you affect the circular motion, the rotation of these circles, then you change that circle and you break that circle, and those circles are not allowed to complete anymore. So a lot of these things are going to affect other industries that will ensure that we cannot go back to a norm, an old way of doing things. The Postal Service. The Postal Service, there's many people online, as you guys can Google, there are people that are having horrible, horrible issues with the Postal Service. And I would say as of the end of fourth quarter of 2019 up until now, Amazon like getting anything from Amazon today where you would pay, and it got to a point where Amazon it seemed like they would just deliver whenever they felt like it, as if there was just nobody there to deliver, yet you had a record number of orders online because of the COVID. And the post office, and every year they're raising rates and saying that they're losing money to a point where there's no amount of money that can fix the Postal Service. And then with the horror stories I'm hearing of people saying that the post office and Amazon people are just throwing their packages, breaking items, and not delivering items, people stealing postal and Amazon, workers just stealing items, just not even delivering them. They see a certain package and they just shake it up and they just keep it and say that it was lost. There's tons of stories of these things happening. So imagine these things happening to a person that is dependent on some medicine that's coming in the mail, and a person just keeps the package, and then that medicine keeps somebody alive. They just had a heart transplant or some type of transplant, or they're severe diabetic or something. They don't get their medicines. That is life-threatening, and that could cost somebody their life. So these things, you can't undo certain things that are happening. And as it becomes more prevalent and the systems that were in place to keep these things from happening fall apart, the people that are those type of people, they will go and get more and more emboldened to do the things they're doing. And they're only going to teach other people. And as some people see other people doing it, they're going to want to do it. So this is what's happening. If you look online, you'll see the spreading of this type of thing when it comes to delivery services and things like that. Another thing, there are many businesses that have closed due to the pandemic. Most of those, I ain't gonna say most of them, but I would say a good portion of them have not even they're never going to reopen. They're never going to reopen. So all of those people that were employed, they all have lost basically everything that they had, and they're basically starting over by having to go get a job again and hopefully making a good amount of money that they were making before. But without if millions of people lose jobs in a short amount of time, then there's not millions of jobs that are being created because of the snowball effects of those people not working. Then, guys, you have states and cities that are going back to a diminished opening capacity, meaning they have since the spring started to roll into summer, a lot of states and cities were opening up again, letting people open their businesses and open up facilities and things like that. A lot of these states are starting to have what is said to be a rise in COVID-19 cases. And a lot of these cities and states, they're fear-mongering and they're getting people to start to panic, and now states and stuff are starting to close down and roll back some of those openings to almost what they want to be is everybody back in their houses quarantined. And we're in the dead of the summer right now, so it makes no sense to do that, but this is where things seem to be headed. And it goes into a domino effect that comes from layoffs, furloughs, that leads you have foreclosures, and it leads into things like no health insurance, high unemployment. Those things lead into things like if you get sick, you'll have the insurance to go to the hospital anymore. And because there's not a lot of insurance out there, then the hospital costs are going to skyrocket. And hospitals are only going to want to deal with people who have the means to be seen. They're not going to want to deal with a lot of insurances because the insurance industry is going to start to fail, guys, because of the lack of participation. Most people's health insurance is through their job. If you don't have a job, you don't have health insurance, and there's just no way around that. The government health insurance, I wouldn't bet on things. There are people who still have not gotten the stimulus unemployment checks. They've never been able to get even one unemployment check from the government because of the COVID-19. There are tons of people that have never gotten that. There were people that didn't even get the stimulus check. So there's lots of people out there that are suffering through the lack of financial support that they had before, guys. But it goes also into unemployment. The unemployment means you have missed rent, missed mortgage payments. That leads to evictions and foreclosures. When you have those things, now you don't pay your rent. Now your landlords can't pay their rent and they can't pay their mortgages to the banks. And what happens with them, they're foreclosed on. So when you have renters being foreclosed on and homeowners being foreclosed on, there is no legitimate housing that exists because it's all foreclosed. The bank owns it all. The problem with that is when we had the housing bubble that crashed, you had tons of a glutton of houses that the banks own, and those houses became a lot of them were in disrepair because the banks could only send so many people out to take care of these properties, to where a lot of the properties were becoming dilapidated. There were people who own properties, leased properties, and they just would not even upkeep the property. So it turned pretty decent neighborhoods into what looked like horrible neighborhoods within a matter of months. These things, guys, cannot be avoided. These are things that are going to build, and we've seen these things on a smaller scale, but at this point, we're in a place that we've never been in before, so we have to multiply those effects in order to understand where we sit. Again, these things, that domino effect, it leads into schools not reopening because a lot of schools now have taken to saying that come fall of 2020, they're going to do everything online. And then there's a problem with that as well, because most students most students require hands-on learning. They require being in front of a teacher and getting individual help. Well, that help that a teacher can do, walk over to your desk and, lean over and point out, answer a problem, that you can't do that online. You can't do that virtually. Those things that the kid that has problems at home, he won't have a mentor or someone that, hey, what's going on? Pull them to the side and see you're not doing as well in class. You don't have that anymore because the kid is not in front of the teacher. So there are things that children will suffer besides the anxiety of not seeing their friends. A lot of kids are already going through horrible times. The disassociation of being around friends all the time, and all of a sudden you're in a house or you're stuck where you're around the same people and you're not used to those type of environments. As an adult, you've grown to get used to those things, but as children, those social interactions mean so much that a lot of kids are losing it. And nobody's talking about that because the psychological effects of that, the amount of counseling and counselors you'll need to survive through something like this, guys, the system does not have the means to facilitate the counseling needs that were needed to get through this. Another thing from the schools, it leads to parents not being able to go back to work, those that can work, because if they go back to work, their children were usually in school, and that's how they were able to not have to afford childcare, which most of them cannot afford childcare. So not having childcare, you're leaving your kids at home. Most of the times nowadays, it would be with other kids because that's who's at home all the time now because there's no school. So you'll have kids at home with kids, and no decent parent wants to leave kids at home with other kids and expect them to be able to provide and care for those kids the way that a parent can. But the problem is not being able to go to work means no money, and kids not being able to go back to school means that the parents can't go to work even if they're able to go to work. If their business is open, they can't go to work to get the income, and then they can't be there when they're at the time their kids is out of school. They're coming home so they can be there for their children, and their kids are at school with adults being the caregivers. It's a big snowball effect, guys. There's no way to go back to what we used to know. There's no way to do it. Another thing is restaurants. This is another big thing that we saw a lot during the around '08 and all of that, when the stock market crashed and you had all these businesses that were failing. Well, it reminds me of the stories of like the Detroit, the auto industry. When a lot of the stuff started to leave Detroit, the production of the vehicles and things like that, when they started to close the plants and things down, there were a lot of food trucks, restaurants, small, repair shops and delis and, a whole bunch of smaller businesses and mom and pop businesses that depended on those workers, that when they went to work, those shifts, those 3 shifts, those people's businesses thrived because they had a built-in consumer base. And that consumer base, as those industries started to leave, then those people started to go out of business as well, because now those people were making a good amount of money because there were a good amount of well-paying jobs in a very centralized location. And they could always depend on a certain amount of people coming and purchasing what they had to sell. But the more of those jobs that left, the less of those people that spent that money that were there to help their business to thrive. If there is nobody there at the lunch shift, then there's nobody to buy from the food truck. If there's no cars that are being driven to work and having these problems, there's no need for a on-site mechanic or a mobile mechanic. These things affect all of these other small industries, guys. And what we've seen is this is not a buildup. We instantly were dropped into this around February, March of this year. And since then, we've been stuck in limbo, and everybody's stuck at the same time. So all these industries, they are not able to, these small mom and pop shops and things that actually are the real true backbone of this country. That's where all your jobs are for real. It's small business. Corporations have no match to the amount of people that operate small businesses and little mom and pop shops. They have no match to the numbers. Your numbers come from people who start their own business and they may have 5 or 10 employees. And you have this little store and that corner store and this dollar store and the mom and pop shop and the beautician and the restaurant and the small market and those things. This is where the heart of this country is when it comes to economics. And those people are the most affected by this, because when the big industries are not operating, those smaller people cannot operate. And then, guys, that goes even into when you don't have someone that drives to work every day. There's another thing that a lot of people are missing. It goes into missed and lapsed automobile, marine, motorcycle, and different types of insurance that covers accidents. Now, imagine the amount of accidents that you see day to day going to work. Multiply that by people who have no job but just are trying to just go places, but they don't have money. So guess what happens? You're going to feed yourself and your family first before you pay car insurance. A lot of people let their car insurance lapse every few months, and they get new ones if they get in trouble, but a lot of people don't have car insurance. So if you're driving and if you're in an accident with one of these people that don't have insurance, good luck getting your car fixed. And guess what happens to you at that point? If that's your only source of transportation to work, to get your family where you need to get to, you're now thrust into a bad position where you now have to find transportation to get yourself going. A lot of people are not seeing the total effects of what we at, guys. And there's so much more. And I'll do a part 2 on this because I don't want to do this. This will be forever because there's so many little threads that tie together that have all been, the main thread has been pulled, guys. It's unwound. And there's no way that, short of a miracle, there's no way to get out of this. It's just not possible. There, talk about what's called a reset. It's impossible to do a reset. This the only other than a miracle, the only thing that will change this is for everything to be destroyed and for man to dig itself out from the ruins and start all over again, which is where I believe that the people that are orchestrating this, and make no mistake, it is orchestrated. But I believe that's where where they're trying to make this head to. It'll never get there, but guaranteed this is where that is being. This is the direction that the world is being pointed into. You're going to be put in a position where you're almost begging, or more than likely begging. You want something so bad, you're going to beg for vaccines. You're going to beg to be ruled over. You're going to beg for the things that you reject in this world. They want you to be put in a position where you're going to beg for those things, guys. That's where we're going with this. And this is why the ammo shortage of 2020 is the least of your concerns. And this is part 1. I'm going to do a part 2, guys, because there's so much more to this. Please subscribe to the channel, guys, and hopefully you got a lot out of this. Hopefully you guys are thinking with clear heads. Hopefully you guys are thinking with clear heads and try not to panic. Try to use clarity in your thoughts. Analyze your situation. See the things you have and the things you don't have. Be thankful for the things you have and things you don't have. Be glad if those things can be a burden to you. Be glad that you don't have them. If they're a necessity to you, use your clear thoughts and think of ways to get those things you have without crossing someone in a bad way to get them. Because once you've gotten them, then the race is on for someone just like them to come take it from you, guys. So it's your man Blocka Blocka TV. I'll catch you on the next one.